just been conceived by us, and as such is contained within our own mind, which makes us, on the contrary, very large. Relatively speaking, we are infinitely large, in fact. A similar condition holds for time. By that I mean, if you take the entire scope of the individual human life, from birth to death, and you compare that to the entirety of human history, we seem to occupy a rather insignificant stretch of time. But now, if you compare that entire stretch of recorded human history, some several thousand years, to the 2 to 3 million years in which cognition is known to exist in a singular expression on this planet, that entire stretch of human history seems rather tiny and insignificant, and we seem even tinier in comparison. But you compare that to the several billions of years that life on our planet is supposed to have existed, and we seem incredibly tiny indeed, at least until we take a second and realize that that entire stretch of time, going as far back as we can imagine and extending an incredible distance into the future, in fact, as far as we're planning into the future, and we realize that that entire stretch is contained within our minds as a one, we realize that once again we're actually quite large. The human mind, and only the human mind, exists within the universe in such a way that the universe exists effectively within mind. That in fact all human activity which can truly be called human activity is mind acting lawfully on mind. Human ideas are not developed in isolation. They are developed in a process which Plato identified as the dialogue. The juxtaposition of two seemingly contradictory impressions to generate a paradox which must be resolved. This constant interplay of ideas is exactly that which we see in a several-voice fugue. There is a difference between eternity and forever. When most people discuss life after death, they are conceiving of their life as a series of events, unfolded in time, and they're wondering whether that sequence will continue on after the death of their body. But in reality, immortality is something which happens much sooner. For instance, Joe Blow makes a discovery of principle. Joe Blow dies. But the principle, we say, lives on after him. But where in reality was that principle before he died? An idea is immortal while the person lives. A universal principle has a location relative to the universe, which mirrors the location of a musical idea relative to the sequence of events in a composition. This outsideness of the process, this ability to exist outside of time, registers to the person who believes they exist in time as a sort of forever. In reality, for the thing that exists outside of the sequence of events, it exists as a one, as a single concept which we might call eternity. In this way, immortality is something which occurs during the life of the individual. Now, this has a number of interesting consequences. The first is that we no longer have the distinction between so-called moral law and so-called physical law. We're no longer justified in making some artificial distinction between fact and idea. In fact, the relative truthfulness or untruthfulness of the ideas that we hold from a moral standpoint is directly expressed physically in the so-called objective universe. In this way, we begin to get a real ontological sense of what human immortality is. It's not some prize you're waiting for after your death. It's not some punishment that you face after dying. It's a state of mind in which you exist during the so-called course of your life. But as we see here, the effective course of your life, your efficient existence, is something that extends much more broadly than your physical existence. The active you, the efficient you, is something much more expansive than the space that your body occupies in space and in time. The space-time you has the same enfolding character as the process that's responsible for the creation of this universe. But now this notion of the creative human individual, this notion of the creative human mind not as some object within the universe, but as an object of the universe, this notion has major implications for the science of human economics. If, by human economics, we mean the activity of the aggregate of all human minds, not simply all human minds that exist at this present moment, but all human minds that have ever existed, and all human minds that will ever exist, to act within and upon that universe as a creative organizing force. In order to explore this idea more closely, we're now going to take a look at the works of Vladimir Ivanovich Vernadsky and his concepts of the biosphere and the noosphere.